It's Wednesday, November the 20th. Lake levels, been hanging about 917, just a little under for the last week or so. Been pretty consistent. But I think it's been 2 weeks since I did a fishing report, but we had a bunch of rain and the lake actually came up about 5 foot, and it seems like it's kind of stabilized right around that 917. The bite pretty much, I think is still pretty tough, but I got a few things going the last few days that's kind of exciting. I got onto a real good crankbait bite. This weekend I fished up into mid-James, and the conditions were great for throwing a crankbait. We caught some on a rock crawler, some on some square bills, but it was by no means fast and furious. We had to cover a lot of water. Even with all that rain up here in the James, the watercolor is still pretty clear. Down lake, the water's real clear. And I didn't mention the water temperature. Water temperature's still right around that 60-degree mark. If you get way up in the river arms, you'll find some mid-50s. But it's still right at that 60, and it'll get up 62, 63 in the afternoon. But when I was up there in the James, we also caught some fish in the center of the deep creeks on a spoon. Found a lot of bait out there in the centers of the creek, and some of them had some fish underneath them. Depending on how deep the fish were, we caught some on a 7/8 ounce Dixie Jet slab spoon, and also a 3/4 ounce white flutter spoon. Now, I usually use the flutter spoon when the fish and bait are up a little higher in the water column. If they're down near, deeper, closer to the bottom, I'll use the slab spoon. And a lot of what we was doing was just kind of cruising around in the center of them creeks, looking for the big schools of shad and then fishing underneath them. If the shad was up higher in the water column, we'd throw the Dixie Jet flutter spoon through them, or Demiki rig as well. In the water, like I say, up there in the Kimbling area, it's still real clear. We'd throw a Demiki rig with all kinds of different styles of swim baits behind it. But one thing I found on these, this is a Queen City tungsten head, and if you're using forward-facing sonar, there's definitely a deal with the tungsten head. It shows up a lot better on your live scope. It's easier to pick up your bait. They're a little pricey, so when I'm throwing them around trees, I try to make sure I keep my bait in visual contact on the forward-facing sonar so that I can keep it out of the trees. But I do notice you pick your bait up a lot better on the tungsten head than you do a regular lead jig head. But, I went up into the White River the last couple days, and it seems like as soon as I turned the corner or got up around Baxter, from Baxter up towards Shell Knob, the water's got an awesome color. It's, got about 2.5, 3 foot of visibility. It's crystal clear in the mid-lake and down by the dam, and even the James River was clear. And I think, I think a lot of that rain that we had, there was a lot more rain in Arkansas, and I remember seeing pictures of the Kings River, was all trashed out. I think a lot of that stained water that I'm seeing in the White River from Baxter on up is water from that rain that's coming down through the Kings as they, suck the lake down. They slowed the generation down, but the last few days they were running it pretty good, which pulled that stained water down. But anyways, I got onto a real good rock crawler bite up there, and it seemed like in that stained water, the more solid colors were working better for me. Red with a little bit of orange, like a red craw, Ozark craw, a little chartreuse in it. And, the fish were on a lot of different style banks. It's kind of one of the deals you just had to put the trolling motor down. But we tried to key on a lot of the banks that had that black ledge rock and lava rock, especially where it went to gravel. But we also caught some fish off of, flat gravel banks. For the most part, it seemed like if I kept the boat in 20 foot, 15 to 20 foot, kind of parallel into the bank, The one thing we did find for sure is the fish are definitely in like little wolf packs or groups. You get one bite, you're going to get, 2 to 4 bites in a little small area. And even with the conditions that we had, there was no wind at all, but I think the color, the stained water, made a huge difference. And we caught all 3 species of fish, several, quite a few keepers. We caught smallmouth, largemouths, and Kentuckys. But, I think a lot of them fish are up, even in the clear water, but they're just real hard to catch unless you get the conditions just right. And, there's still quite a few fish being caught on a glide bait, the quality, but you got to throw it and throw it and throw it. You got to cover a lot of water with it. But the crankbait bite, I'm hoping as that stained water moves down lake, down towards Kimberling, that should help that crankbait bite as well. A few other baits we caught them on too was like a Spro Little John and red. We caught some fish on the frit sides. Like I say, the darker colors seem to work better for me in that off cold water. Now, when we were up in the James where the water was a little clearer, the Phantom Watermelon worked good. And also the Stone Cold seemed to work good up there. And I think the Stone Cold would work with the Stone Cold one right here. But I think the Stone Cold one will work good in the stained water as well. We just didn't throw it. And, we tried a shaky head and a small jig a little bit, but it seemed like we had to fish that bait so slow, we were better off just covering a lot of water, with the crankbait. And we also caught a few on a chatterbait. They didn't seem to be all the way back into the pockets. It seemed like from the mouth of a creek to about 3/4 of the way back. And, some of them are on the little points going into the cuts or halfway back. And even when you went into a cut in a creek arm, it didn't seem like the very back was very productive. Almost before you got to the back, like, 3/4 of the way to the mouth. And, another little key seemed to be in the areas that we were fishing, we didn't visually see bait, but you could see schools of bait in that 8 to 12 feet on either your 2D sonar or your live scope. Seemed to be every place we got bit, I could see shad on the locators. And I think there's been, a lot of guys still catching them out there on a Demiki rig, which will be a pretty solid pattern throughout the winter. A lot of them fish, as the water cools down, aren't going to come up shallow. It seems like the last several years, as long as the bait is out there, and once that thermocline breaks up, then fish are going to go, deeper and deeper out there in the center of the lake. And the key is you just got to stay on your trolling motor and cover a lot of water till you find schools of bait or fish. Some of them will be like the ones we caught up in the James the other day on a spoon, were in the center of the guts, over deeper timber. And, we caught them from where the bottom depth was 50 foot into where the bottom depth was about 20. Now out there in 50 foot, the fish seemed like they were suspended in that 25 to 35 foot range. As we got further back in, they were dead on the bottom. But, I think the shallow bite's going to pick up if we got a little bit of cooler weather coming in, and especially in the areas of the lake that got the stained water. I think if I was to go out fun fishing, it would definitely be up in the Kings River, Shell Knob, Campbell Point, up in that area where there's a lot of stain as far as, for crankbait, spinnerbait, even chatterbait bite. So till next week, good luck, good fishing.